She thought she could simply take his boat for a quick ride, no permission asked. She assumed he wouldn't notice right away, and even if he did, it would amount to little more than a harmless misunderstanding. Yet once the rightful owner, a seasoned Coast Guard commander, discovered what she had done, he made certain she faced harsh consequences. In the end, she found herself forced to explain her actions before the authorities, and the entire ordeal was anything but pleasant. She was known for her complaints in the gated waterfront community, always questioning others' choices and assuming an air of self-importance. Her target this time was his brand new fully equipped fishing boat, which he kept moored at his private dock. From the day he moved in, she had voiced her opinions on how unsightly or unnecessary his boat was, claiming it clashed with the neighborhood's aesthetics. She brought up minor gripes at HOA gatherings, mentioning that nobody else had such a fancy vessel, or that certain amenities should be collectively approved by the community. He generally shrugged off her chatter, finding it easier to ignore her than to escalate any tension. But people with that degree of entitlement rarely stop at grumbling. One routine weekend, the Coast Guard officer woke early, planning to do standard maintenance on the boat before heading out on the water. He ambled down to his dock, coffee in hand, fully expecting to greet the morning sun with the sight of his prized craft bobbing gently in the slip. Instead, he found empty space. The boat was gone. For a moment, confusion washed over him. His gaze dropped to the rope ends, clearly cut, not merely untied. He stood there, trying to keep calm. Most people might have panicked, but his years in the Coast Guard taught him that frantic worry solves nothing. He bent to examine the severed ropes, confirming that it wasn't a local marina mishap. This was theft. A single question popped into his mind: who would be reckless enough to take a Coast Guard commander's boat? The answer surfaced the minute Mr. Thompson, an older neighbor tending his garden nearby, noticed the officer's troubled look. "Thought you'd let that HOA lady borrow the boat," Mr. Thompson remarked. "Saw her fiddling with it early this morning, then she took off down the canal." A flicker of anger crossed the commander's face. He pictured the woman who'd spent weeks complaining about his boat, now apparently deciding to help herself. The more pressing concern, though, was that she might have zero clue how to operate a vessel safely. In the open water, incompetent handling could lead to real danger. He wasted no time. Returning to the house, he quickly checked the boat's built-in GPS tracker from his phone, a standard feature in a high-end vessel, especially for someone used to sea operations. Sure enough, the boat was drifting away from the shoreline, its path suggesting no clear direction. The suspicion was that she wasn't just a thief but also an amateur boater about to land herself in a heap of trouble. The commander jumped into his car and drove straight to the local Coast Guard station. He explained to a colleague on duty, one who couldn't help letting out a chuckle at the audacity of the story. Still, theft is theft, and if she ran the boat aground or caused an accident, it would only complicate things for everyone involved. They quickly organized a patrol to intercept the stolen craft, using the GPS coordinates as a guide. They hopped aboard a patrol boat and sped into the open water. The day was calm enough, but that calm only highlighted how far the stolen boat had drifted. Eventually, they caught sight of it, and the view was borderline comical. The boat pivoted aimlessly, and a single figure, the woman, stood at the helm, clearly shouting into the wind in a state of near panic. She'd ventured farther out than she likely intended, unable to steer effectively. The commander tried contacting her over the radio frequency. His voice remained professional, though inside, he felt a mix of anger and exasperation. "This is the United States Coast Guard," he announced. "Identify yourself and your vessel." On the other end, they heard garbled yells. She seemed to plead for help, claiming the boat was broken. The officer recognized it as an operator problem, not a mechanical fault. Pulling the patrol boat alongside, they could see her sweaty, red-faced, gripping the steering wheel with knuckles white from tension. When she finally recognized who was at the helm of the patrol boat, her eyes registered pure horror. All that swagger from the HOA meetings dissolved into panic. She stammered about how it was just a short trip, how she intended no harm. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard crew calmly prepared to board and assist. "Are you aware this vessel is stolen property?" the commander asked over the radio. "You've left port without the owner's consent," cut the mooring lines and ventured into open water untrained. She sputtered that it was a misunderstanding, that she only borrowed it, and planned to return it. She still clung to some flicker of hope, that she could talk her way out of the situation. The officer stifled a laugh. Borrowing typically doesn't involve slicing ropes in the dead of morning. If you're still watching, please make sure to subscribe. Let's get back to the story. With her flailing attempts to direct the boat, it had begun to spin in slow circles, but a Coast Guard colleague easily maneuvered aboard and took control. The woman, sweaty and trembling, realized how foolish she appeared. Gone was the neighbor who acted like queen of the HOA. She was reduced to a sheepish figure, swallowing her pride as the patrol boat guided her stolen craft back to shore. The trip back felt longer than it was, mostly due to her anxious silence. She tried once or twice to insist she thought it was allowed, that the commander had plenty of money anyway, so she didn't see the harm. Yet the presence of Coast Guard uniforms and official authority made her aware this wasn't just a petty spat between neighbors. She'd committed a serious offense, one with potential maritime law implications. Upon docking, local officers awaited them. The woman tried to protest, claiming she was just taking a test ride, but the cut mooring lines told a different story. She had little choice but to accompany the authorities for a formal statement. The Coast Guard commander filed charges: property theft, unauthorized operation of a vessel, and reckless endangerment, none of which were easily dismissed. For a moment she pleaded to handle it quietly, citing her respectable standing in the community. The officer calmly noted that respectable or not, she'd stolen a boat, which was a crime. In the following days, she tried various tactics, first contacting the HOA, pressing them to push the commander to drop his complaint. Then, she offered hush money, suggesting she could pay for any damage or inconvenience if he'd just let it slide. He refused, determined to see justice done. She even pleaded about her reputation and how it would look for her. It made no difference. She had taken the boat illegally, and no plea about social standing could erase the facts. Eventually, a court date arrived. The evidence, from the cut ropes to eyewitness accounts, was overwhelming. She was forced to cover legal fees and pay restitution. Her relationship with the community deteriorated. The same neighbors who once saw her as an overzealous busybody now regarded her as a pariah, humiliated by her own arrogance and theft. She lost her seat on the HOA board. Nobody wanted leadership from someone who had grandly stolen a Coast Guard commander's property. With her social status in freefall, she quietly sold her house and left the neighborhood. There were no more demands about ugly boats, no more prying into how others lived. Meanwhile, the commander carried on with his day job, reinforcing security measures on his dock, not so much because he feared another theft, but to ensure no one else tried the same stunt. Word spread quickly that the boat belonged to someone who knew maritime law inside and out, and only a fool would repeat that woman's error. The most telling detail was how quickly her bravado disappeared the moment real consequences loomed. On land, she'd posed as an all-powerful figure who could dish out fines and dictate the rules, certain that her position on the HOA gave her immunity. But at sea and in the face of real authority, she discovered just how powerless she truly was. Summoned before the authorities, she looked nothing like the unstoppable neighbor everyone recognized in the condo's corridors. In the aftermath, the commander found some amusement in the entire ordeal. He'd spent years dealing with maritime emergencies, rogue waves, even the occasional smuggler. He never anticipated having to rescue his own stolen boat from a clueless neighbor. Yet it underscored what he already knew: arrogance plus ignorance often leads to spectacular mistakes. If she had simply asked permission, or better yet, minded her own business, she could have avoided a meltdown of her public image. Meanwhile, other neighbors felt relief at her absence. No more petty demands about property aesthetics, no more heavy-handed HOA edicts that singled out those who dared to have a boat or a garden beyond her taste. The neighborhood breathed easier, and ironically, the commander's boat ended up bringing people together. Everyone swapped stories of that fateful day she was caught spinning in circles at sea, waiting for the Coast Guard to reel her in. Some might see the event as comical, others as a cautionary tale. When a neighbor's sense of entitlement reaches the level of grand theft, only firm legal recourse can restore order. For the commander, the lesson was simpler. He reaffirmed that if you do the right thing, stand your ground, and trust the law, you can deflate even the biggest bully. And if along the way you get a front row seat to see them cower in front of the authorities they once thought they controlled, so be it. The sea, after all, can be unforgiving, especially to those who have no idea how to navigate it. Please like and subscribe and check my channel out for more stories, and comment if you had any Karen experiences. Subscribe.